You are listening to Unplugged, a podcast from one of America's leading electric cooperatives. Now here's your host, Jacob Puckett.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We are continuing our installment of the Hurricane Helene Tapes. I've got a special guest here with me today, Chris White, Chief Meteorologist at Foothills Weather Network. One of our local guys here joining us on the podcast. And Chris, it is a pleasure to be with you, man. I hope you're doing well.
It is a pleasure to be with you too, Jacob. We hope you're doing well as can be.
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of flirted with this idea of having a podcast episode for a while. And, now that we really got a reason to now, right? we had the biggest storm in our history, Western North Carolina. I even think I've heard all of North Carolina. This is the most impactful storm as far as dollars go. I don't even know where to start because there's so much we could unfold from this storm. But I really think it's something that's been underscored by the event, and you may disagree, but it's not as much the hurricane as it was the 2 days leading up to the hurricane. So we heard a lot of language about the predecessor rainfall event. And for folks who are listening don't understand what a predecessor rainfall event is, do you kind of want to unfold that and then maybe go into this setup that we had for this storm and why it was unique?
It was a very unique storm system, similar to what set up back in 1916. Of course, I nor most of us were around at that time. But what we had is a cold front dove down from the Midwest, and it stalled right up against the Appalachian Mountains. And if you've lived here any length of time, you know that if we have a stalled front in the Appalachian Mountains, that it gives exponential lift to the atmosphere with any kind of southeasterly or easterly fetch. And a fetch, what I'm talking about there is a stream of moisture coming off of a body of water. So in this case, it was off the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. And low pressure developed along that front and moved up to the north about 2 days ahead of time. And we started receiving rain somewhere, depends on where you were at, but Wednesday, and the rain just really picked up in earnest going into Thursday. I think the first indication that we actually started having problems was Wednesday night into Thursday morning. We got a picture of somebody was in water, and all they were showing was their feet in water. And I thought to myself, and Daniel and I were working at the time, and I said, well, I wonder what's in the creek. It's so important that they're down in the creek, or why are they in the water? And then they pan around and they're in their living room.
Oh, no.
And so we're seeing people in Old Fort initially off that Mill Creek flood that just really inundated that area, as we all know now, even before the main impacts from Helene moved through. And a big portion of this rain was that predecessor rain event. Front stalled. We received 6, 8, 10 inches of rainfall ahead of Helene even arriving here. So while that was unfolding and down in the Gulf of Mexico, Helene was brewing and strengthening, getting ready to come on shore in Florida. And of course, these tropical systems try to go to the path of weakest resistance. So that is unfortunately along a frontal boundary, the lee side of the trough. And as it moved north, we all know what happened. The winds and the rain came in with those catastrophic impacts. And I hear a lot of people saying, we didn't know it was going to be this bad. We had no idea that it would be this bad. But I think we've got a ways to go in the weather industry in the way we broadcast our information out and the way we talk about information. This was a catastrophic, life-threatening event. We started saying that Wednesday. That's not something that we take lightly, at Foothills Weather, using that type of language. If you ever hear that language come from our agency, you know that it's going to be something of significance. So could we have imagined that it was as bad as it was with the number of landslides and the wind damage? Absolutely not. I think, the day after that, we were talking already about how this ended up being a combination of Hurricane Hugo from 1989 with a wind event and the rain event that came in with Helene from the non-name storm of 1916. So big implications there from that predecessor rain event. It dropped 6 to 10 inches across the mountains. And of course, that all rolled downhill. And anywhere you had flooding, you're seeing all this sand that's just built up. And that's because of all those landslides that come down. And I know from up in Boone, one of your areas there, a group of our meteorology friends were watching that King Street camera and seeing that water flow down King Street as muddy as it was. We were like, man, that is a landslide somewhere upstream.
Yeah, the King Street camera is interesting. And if you're listening to this or you're watching this right now and you haven't seen that, that's pretty much an easy YouTube search to find that. It went viral definitely there, especially on that day before we lost cell communications and everything else when we were cut off from the world in Western North Carolina. But that scene was nuts because if you look at the way the camera is oriented, anybody who's been through downtown Boone knows that at that left turn right there, adjacent to or across the street from Mass General Store, that is, it's like that. I mean, it's straight downhill. It's a steep grade. So just to even see the water, I guess, pull or even stay on King Street like that just shows you how catastrophic this event was. But you touched on one thing. I think you guys do a wonderful job of keeping everybody informed, but you're right. I think maybe there is some form of doubt that goes on with people when they think, it can't be us, right? It surely can't be. We can't be in a disaster zone. I mean, maybe doubt's not even the right word. It's just thinking it just can't be you. And we're obviously proven wrong with that. Something that sticks out to me, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this as a meteorologist. Do you think the track of the storm lended to maybe some people letting their guard down? Because I looked at this the other day. If you take a wind map of the damage estimates across Western North Carolina and what the peak gusts were in the upstate of South Carolina, if you looked at that, and I gave that to you in July, and I said, Chris, where did this make landfall at? You'd have to say the lowlands of South Carolina, maybe Savannah, Georgia. So I wonder, how much do you think the disbelief maybe came in with this making landfall in Perry, Florida, and people saying there's no way it'll pack that much punch so many hundreds of miles inland?
Absolutely. As human being nature, we try to relate any incident that happens in our lives to something that happened previously. And I don't like comparing storm names, but if in our lifetime we look at Hurricane Hugo, that was a huge event here, and that came in at the lowlands. And that is the storm of recent memory for most people that are alive at this point in time. Well, that were alive in '89, remember that, and that's what they relate to. Well, now we see that this system's not coming from the Atlantic; it's coming from the Gulf of Mexico. There's plenty of land between us and the Gulf of Mexico, and I think we sometimes overlook the fact that when you have a trough like it was over the mountains, that predecessor rain event, that only accelerated Helene and that weather system to the north. With Hugo, it was a similar situation coming off the Atlantic with a cold front to the west and a high pressure to the north. Squeeze played Hugo up into the mountain region, similar fashion. And if you actually look where it came in Perry and took a hook and came back into the mountains, that's anytime you see that type of hook coming from the Gulf of a system coming from the Gulf of Mexico, in Western North Carolina, look out, because those are going to be rough, whether it's from wind or rain. That's exactly what happened with Francis and Ivan back in 2004, where we received copious amounts of rain. We didn't have the landslide issue that we did with this one because we didn't have that predecessor rain event. But obviously, there was some correlation between the two events with the amount of rainfall that did fall.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Anybody who was following the weather knew that this was going to be a bad event, but something that I've heard from not just a few folks, but a lot of folks, is that I think in some ways maybe that center cone was taken just a bit too literally. And we did see the storm go east of guidance just a hair. And that little bit of a jog east from maybe central or western Georgia, with the center brought the center into southwestern North Carolina and the upstate. And to me personally, as you started to see this storm lumber on shore near Perry, Florida that night, it was kind of clear to me that this thing was going a little bit east of the track and that we might have some problems. When was that moment for you in this process or in the storm where you're like, this not only be bad, this could be really, really bad. And this is going to be something that's not only, a huge impact, but possibly a historic impact. Did you have a certain moment where you realized like, yeah, this isn't going to be good?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd taken the week off prior to this because I knew it was going to be a long duration run, a marathon, if you will. So I planned to come in Thursday night to work at my job here with emergency services and 911 in Burke County. Thursday morning, we started looking at guidance and we started looking at the track of the system. And it was like, oh boy, we're on the east side of this track. That's not where we want to be. When I went to bed Wednesday night, we were thinking as a collective meteorology group that this was going to be Atlanta's Hugo. That was our thinking. Oh. Then we wake up Thursday morning, we see it's on the east side of the cone, and we've got to do some more training with our citizens and residents that the center of that cone's not always where it's going to go. The center of circulation could go anywhere in that cone of uncertainty. And Western North Carolina was never removed completely from that. I think the Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center did a wonderful job in forecasting this. If you take this and you put Helene's forecast into a track, it stayed within that cone of uncertainty the entire track up.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that the word catastrophic, there's a lot of hype out there, and I'm trying to think of how to say this professionally. You've got to be careful where you get your information from. Too many times that people become numb to the word of hearing that this is going to be catastrophic. This is going to be a life-changing event. This is going to be this. There's a lot of hype that goes into these type of things. You see it all the time, more so in winter with social media now and certain entities on social media saying, oh, it's going to be the winter storm of the season. And then we get out to the event 100 hours out from that forecast, and there's nothing, not even a flurry. It's sun shining like it is today out there. Weather is very hard to predict 3 days out. To have a cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center that placed Perry, Florida in the cone of uncertainty 6-7 days out is remarkable. And having the technology that we're able to see that and do it, I think we've got to work on our communication better of how to better indicate that this is coming and what impacts are going to be there. And we've got to work, and a little bit of that has to fall on the residents too, and the citizens, that be careful about where you trust to get your weather from, and any news information, because there's sites out there that will play on the hype and the fear mongering. We saw the rain event. We were really dry after Helene, went into a little drought there. Then the first rain event that popped up, we're getting messages, people, these social media pages panicking people over 1/10 of an inch of rain, and there was going to be additional landslides of this. Simply was not the case. And then there's all kinds of misinformation out there. But to see a track from the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service that did so well with this forecast was remarkable. It made my job a lot easier. Did we have the loss of life that we didn't want? Absolutely, we did. Could we have predicted and done a better job in our communication that went out to people? That I think so too. I think we can learn a lot from this and how we communicate that and solidify our job titles a little bit with meteorologists and being there to be the voice of the unknown of what's coming down the road, because nobody knows up until the day of what really is going to happen with the weather. We just try to make an educated guess on that.
Yeah, and I echo what you said. I mean, I think the forecasts were great. It's getting people to take those forecasts seriously is always a challenge. And we even see that, in our own industry, you don't want to excite people or make people fearful of a possible outage event or something like that. But it was becoming pretty apparent there Thursday and especially early Friday morning that we were had a big event, unfolding, and a historic event in hindsight, unfortunately, for our area. Chris, I can't thank you enough for joining us on the podcast today. It's been great. I'm a weather geek, and you know that, and I could probably go for 3 or 4 hours. But historic event, I hope we can talk on better terms sometime when it's not talking about Helene. Maybe we can talk about, winter weather or something. Someone in operations is going to come after me for saying that. But we can talk about something that's interesting, maybe not pertaining to power outages and just the damage this storm caused. But you guys did a great job during this storm. And thank you for everything y'all did as well, because it's those forecasts that got people, to pay attention and really prepare for this thing.